Hello and welcome to the first ever webinar for Wine Club by Majestic. We are here in a Majestic store. We're in our lovely St John's Wood store today, and we're here to delve more into the wines that we hope you've already received. You may even have tasted some wines, drank some of the wines, compared them, started to think about them. So we're here just to dig a little bit deeper into the bottle. You may have already read the brochures that came with your case, found out more about the producers, maybe gone online to hear from the producers themselves with their tasting notes, maybe tried some of the recipes as well. We really hope you enjoy tasting along with us. If you're watching on Facebook Live, get in touch. Please leave your comments, your questions in the chat. Or if you're watching on YouTube afterwards, please post on the group and we'll get back to as many as we can. I'm here today with some of the team from Majestic behind the Wine Club just to talk through a bit more about the wines, learn a bit more about the regions, why we chose the wines to go in this case as well. So I'll introduce who I've got sitting next to me first. We have on the end there, we have Mark CAPON, who is the Wine Club director. We have Beth Kelly, our Master of Wine and wine buyer. And we have Jack Merrilees, who is Head of PR and also starting his Master of Wine. And then I'm Amy Matthews, Head of Content. So hopefully everybody here knows these wines well. We're going to give you some really nice context and just a bit more information about what's in your case. First, I'm going to ask Mark to just chat a bit more about Wine Club, what we're doing here and why we're doing it.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I'm really excited to be here to introduce Wine Club by Majestic. Now, we've spent a lot of time listening with our customers to find out what was most important to them. And there was a lot of information that came back, but above all, it was quality and certainly not gimmicks. So that's what we're here to do with this Wine Club by Majestic. We've used our 40 years of heritage and the relationships with the producers that we have gained over those years to bring you some truly unmissable wines. Each one of those has been expertly curated by our Masters of Wine. So thank you, Beth. And we think that every single bottle deserves its place in the case. Today, we're here to find out why. But just in summary, it's going to be 4 cases, 12 bottles per year with an optional Christmas case. We love these wines. We're excited to bring them to you. We hope you do too. But let's get tasting and have some fun.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. Well, our first case, we felt it really had to be France. France probably means something a bit different to everybody in terms of wine. You might just know your holiday wines. If you've been down to the south coast, you might have been to Paris and tried a few there. You might be very well versed in France so far. We thought it was just the perfect place. So much history, so much heritage. The big names of Burgundy, Bordeaux, Champagne, but equally so many hidden gems, wonderful regional variants and varieties as well. So I'd like to hand over to Beth first of all. Beth, could you tell us more about why we chose France for our first case?
So we chose France for our first case because it's a very interesting winemaking country. There's a lot of history there, lots of very classical wine producing regions, Bordeaux, Burgundy, that customers have heard of. But there's also a massive variety of climates, all climate in the north, kind of similar to what we're used to in the UK, right down to the Mediterranean, where you have a much warmer climate, which can produce much richer styles of wine, and a massive diversity and great variety from, maybe best known varieties such as Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, to some slightly more interesting great varieties that we'll talk about when we get to the wines.
Jack, do you want to say a bit about France? Maybe why you love French wines?
Oh, well, I guess it's the absolute diversity of it as well, as kind of Beth says. You can go from a real plethora of different styles, and actually I think it's a lot more innovative than people maybe give it credit for. You always think of the classical names, the Bordeaux's, Burgundies, but look at some of the up and coming producers, look at some of the boundaries that are being pushed as well, and there's a lot to discover, and there's a lot to kind of keep going back to as well.
Marco, you've worked in wine for a long time, very experienced. What's your take on France?
It is innovating all the time, and there is such a breadth of styles and new producers coming, some preserving the tradition and others bringing new techniques, and all of them stamping their own character onto those wines. That's what makes it endlessly fascinating.
Fantastic. Well, I think we can't wait to get tasting. We're going to do a very short chat about how to taste wine. I'm sure there are lots of you watching who have tasted wine a million times before, very, very used to what you do, different tasting wine to drinking it perhaps, or this might be your first time. You might just have enjoyed drinking it before. So I'm going to pour a splash out here for Beth, who's going to start us off just with a little bit of advice, a few do's and don'ts to how to get the most out of tasting your wines.
So most of my friends like going straight to have a drink from the glass. But tasting wine, I'd normally start by looking at the wine, so looking at the appearance against a white background, so you don't have anything that can change the colour. You can just get a sheet of paper if you have lots of patterns on your table, etc. You'd expect a lot of the white wines that are in the case to be kind of a pale kind of lemon colour. This is quite common in kind of younger wines. They can get a lot more golden, deeper coloured as they age in the bottle, or maybe if they've been aged in cask at the producer. Moving on, if we have a smell, so if you give it a good swirl around in your glass, this is to help.
If you haven't done swirling before, you can start on the table. I think
Yes.
it can. It's not so dangerous with white wine, but red wine particularly, you might not want it to end up on your carpet. So if you haven't swirled before, you put it down on the table and just give it a bit of a circular motion like that, just to get the air in.
Also, I can be quite enthusiastic in my swirling, and it can kind of come out the glass.
Indeed.
So you're swirling it to get extra oxygen into the glass to really open up those aromas. So then you get to have a lovely sniff, and this is one of my favourite parts of tasting wine. So on this wine, I'm getting quite a lot of kind of very kind of fresh, lemony apple aromas. There's kind of a light, what people call mineral note. So kind of think about stones after it's been raining, that kind of thing.
In fact, this is probably a good moment to introduce what you should have received in your case, which is our lovely flavour wheel, which can just be a really nice prompt to how you talk about some of the aromas and flavours, like Beth's doing. You know, people like Beth talk about wine every day, and so we're used to having some of the words ready to go. But if you don't, you might have an idea of what it tastes like, you just can't find the language. So this is where a flavour wheel comes in. You can think, you know, like a wine like this, oh, it's tasting quite fresh, it's tasting quite light and maybe a bit stony. You can't really think of the words, but you'd find the appropriate section and be like, oh yes, that's it. It's a bit mineral, there's a bit of lemon peel, a bit of grapefruit. So this is why we've provided this for you. So you
Shall
can
we pick one out?
What from here?
this,
Go on. If you,
yes.
yeah. Well, Beth,
Just to show
our
it
MW,
works.
I think. There we go. Where would you say this is on our flavour wheel? Putting you on the
It's
spot.
tense.
I hope it's on there somewhere.
Okay,
Well,
so
citrus on
we're
there.
over here with the citrus fruit. So this kind of the lighter green. Yeah, I'd say there's quite a lot of kind of lemon notes. And then if you go down to tree fruit, I'm definitely getting that kind of slightly more green style. So more kind of apple, maybe pear, rather than things like stone fruits where you might expect it to come from a slightly warmer climate.
I'm getting pear drops. And they're sweets from the olden days, so I remember them, but some of you might not.
Okay, so after we've had a good old sniff, what's next?
Then we get to move on to everyone's favourite part, and that's tasting the wine. So normally I would take the wine in, and you kind of need to pull some air in as you take the wine in, to try and again get some oxygen into that wine and really bring out the flavours in your mouth.
You'll see us having a quick little spit here. That's because we're at work and we're tasting a lot of wines. You, of course, don't have to do the same. But spitting can be pretty important in our job.
Yes, if I'm tasting over 50 wines in a day, then obviously it's kind of essential. Otherwise, I wouldn't be assessing the wines correctly to ensure we have a fantastic case of wines here.
Absolutely. Could be pretty dangerous by the 50th one. So let's talk a bit about how the wine tastes then, about the palate.
Yes, so normally start by assessing sweetness, and people often think this is to do with the amount of different fruit flavours in the wine, but it's really to do with the residual sugar, and that's kind of a feeling on the tip of your tongue. So most wines you'll be tasting here should be completely dry. This wine was dry, but sometimes you will get that slight residual sugar, especially you might have something from a slightly warmer climate, then you might be describing it as off dry, moving through to things like medium dry with something like a rosé d'Anjou, or fully sweet if you have a dessert wine. The next thing you discuss is acidity, and this is really how much it makes your mouth water. This is from quite a cool climate, and so you really find that the side of your tongue really, really does water, and so I would describe this wine as high acidity. If you're going for a slightly warmer climate, you might find it kind of is more towards kind of medium or lower acidity. And acidity is really, really important because it's what makes you want to take another sip. It's really refreshing in your mouth, especially maybe on a hot day. It's great for pairing with food as well. The next thing you look at is kind of palate weight. And so that's kind of a 3-point scale: light, medium and full. Again, this is a cool climate wine, so you'd expect the wine to be quite light on the palate. The warmer the climate, generally, the fuller the wine is, and it can also be associated to grape variety as well. Some grapes are naturally fuller bodied than others.
And then maybe the actual flavours of the wine.
And yes, the flavours of the wine. So flavour-wise, you'd expect to get something that's pretty similar to what you had on the nose, because the way your nose and mouth are connected, you are tasting the flavours via the aromas. There's a big overlap. But you sometimes might pick up extra elements on it, especially with a red wine. You might get some extra kind of spice notes from the alcohol.
What do some of the flavours you might pick up, what can they tell you about how the wine is made?
So the fruit you'd get in the wine, you'd expect to come from the grape variety itself, and then other things, okay, so such as vanilla, are likely to come from oak aging. Depending on the type of oak, you can get vanilla, coconut, and sometimes some kind of coffee and subtle spices. There's other winemaking techniques. So in white wines, you might have some lees contact, which helps kind of broaden the wine and give it a bit more width on the palate.
And lees are the dead yeast cells, is that right?
Yes, it doesn't sound
no, it doesn't sound particularly
so
appetizing,
appealing,
but a crucial part of the winemaking.
It does make the wine taste very delicious. Yeah.
And you've got malolactic fermentation as well.
Yes, malolactic fermentation, which kind of changes the style of the acidity and makes it feel slightly softer. You find that more on things like Chardonnay. That can also kind of bring kind of creamy kind of flavours and
softens
texture.
it up.
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's really important when you're tasting a wine like this, you actually, those flavours are in there for a reason. This isn't, it doesn't just magically appear in the glass. So there are chemical compounds that you find in oak or in different fermentations. You use different yeasts, and winemakers are always trying to get to that point. So when you're tasting wines, you're kind of going backwards from that winemaker and trying to kind of unlock what they have put in the glass, and that's how you kind of come to really appreciate wine in the way that people like Beth do so well.
Absolutely.
I guess there's a balance for the winemaker in terms of expressing the environment, or what's called the terroir, and then stamping their own identity onto it as well when they're making the wine, and that's why a wine from the same region can taste different, sometimes quite radically, sometimes subtly. But that's again what makes it so interesting.
Absolutely, yeah, great point. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about food and wine matching now as well. We'll mention this as we go through the wines, but just touch a little bit on the ideas behind food and wine matching. There are some theories behind it. I think there are sort of three main approaches. Essentially, you're either looking to match what is in your wine, so the flavours, the characteristics, directly with similar flavours and characteristics of the food, or you're looking to completely contrast. So you might say, take a very sort of rich and creamy dish, and you might want a very fresh and zippy wine to cut through those flavours. But also the third really important factor for me is that you have to find what works for you. You can follow all the rules and regulations of food and wine matching, but really if you try something that's a bit unusual, you try a wine you love, you try a dish you really love, and that works for you, that's really important as well. So just keep trying things out. How do you guys approach this?
Yeah, I've always had a bit of a golden rule with it as well, which is, it is definitely about personal interpretation, but a good match, the wine will taste better and the food will taste better. If you pair a wine with a dish and the wine still tastes fantastic, but the food doesn't taste quite as good as you remember it, that's not a good match. It's not just about getting red meat and red wine. It's classic, but if there's different layers to all of that, and it should be elevated by the match, not kind of diminished by it.
So we'll start our white wines with a super fresh, crisp, zesty Muscadet from Paul Bouis. Beth, over to you.
Okay, So Muscadet is a region in northwest France at the end of the Loire Valley on the Atlantic. It's very cool climate there. You have that Atlantic influence. If you kind of think about going on holiday in southern England where you're not getting that lovely Greek holiday, it's very cool, fresh breezes off the sea. And that kind of gives the wine really lovely citrus notes, and you'd kind of expect kind of green apple and kind of a lighter style when you're tasting.
And quite a light colour.
Yes, a light colour. So if we're going through in the order that we should be going through according to the booklet, you start by looking at the wine. And this is a young wine, 2020, so you'd expect that kind of pale lemon colour, which I have here. And then if you give it a swirl, on the nose you really do get that kind of lemon, green apple style, and maybe kind of minerality and a kind of slight saltiness that I guess you associate with the sea.
Yeah, that's kind of what you said in your notes, and it really comes through. It's very Atlantic.
It really is. So if we have a quick taste. So yeah, really mouth-watering and crisp that you'd expect from a cool climate region, and very light in the mouth, which would make it great with the food at the region.
Well, of course, if you're by the seaside, the best thing to eat is going to be seafood, isn't it? Yeah, Muscadet, as the guys were saying, this is so refreshing, so mouth-watering. You immediately think of any fish and seafood, anything you might find by the seaside, oysters, whelks, cockles, those sort of really traditional bits of seafood, but also fish dishes. I think we've paired it with a crab and cheddar tart, which we thought was going to work deliciously. It would match really nicely with the crab, the salty elements, but cut through the cheddar and the pastry as well.
And it's not an accident that traditional wines go very well with the traditional food of the area.
Exactly.
As well. So coastal wine, coastal food, perfect match.
Spot on. Okay, so in fact, moving on to our second wine, which is another lovely, crisp, zesty, refreshing one. We have the Picpoul De Pinet from Cotes Du Rhône.
So yes, I mean, so this one is from one of those really lovely warm regions you'd like to go to on holiday. So it's from in the south in Languedoc. Picpoul is the grape variety. Pinet is the region, but you still get those sea breezes that come off the Mediterranean. So you have a combination of that really kind of warm southern climate, but really nice freshness as well. So if we look at the wine again, it's that pale lemon colour, as this is a really nice young wine.
Is there any benefit in tilting the wine? I suppose that's more with reds or aged whites.
That's just to help you kind of get that gradient and colour, because in the core it can sometimes be a bit too dark to assess.
This is my kind of wine. I love this wine. I think this is one of those grapes that we've loved at Majestic for a long time and suddenly seems to be kind of gaining traction.
And the freshness just jumps out of the glass as well.
So because this is a warmer region, you get a bit more kind of stone fruit along with that kind of fresh kind of citrus on the nose.
Stone fruits as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a similar freshness and crispness, but as you say, a little bit more weight and fruit intensity. What do you think about food then? Kind of similar matches and food pairings?
I'd say it's got a bit more kind of, because of that warmer climate, weight to it. You could almost go kind of lighter cheeses. I don't know. What would you pair with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to our crab and cheddar tart, something like that matches again. You're absolutely right. It would stand up to the cheddar, like mature cheddar, really nicely, or a nice creamy cheese as well, or much more traditional seafood.
Creamy sauces, because they can get a bit cloying, but the freshness really cuts through.
It's going to cut through, absolutely.
This is actually made by a really interesting producer. So it's made by Leon Stevenson, who's one of my fellow MWs, and he actually started his career as a store manager at Majestic.
At Majestic,
yeah,
great story.
All the best people do.
Of course, of course. Right, moving on. So slightly away from the coast now, we head to Bordeaux for our Sauvignon Blanc. This is the Chateau Renaud Lacoste Sauvignon Blanc. Beth, would you want to give us a little bit of information about this wine?
So Bordeaux is obviously one of the most famous, the French wine regions, but it's much more associated with red wines, and especially people think of those kind of red wines that you'd cellar for a long time and drink when very mature. But they make a lot of very, very good white wine. Generally with red wine, you're thinking about kind of the left bank or the right bank, whereas this is actually from an area called Entre deux Mers, which is literally between, well, it's between two seas, but it's between two rivers. And it's an area in Bordeaux that's very well known for growing Sauvignon Blanc. So we are all familiar with Sauvignon Blanc. It's one of the most loved customer loved grape varieties available. And from Sauvignon Blanc, you expect something really aromatic that really jumps out of the glass. So there'd be kind of citrus notes, but also you'd expect a kind of herbaceousness as well, and probably a light kind of floral character.
I think it's interesting because so many people know Sauvignon Blanc for New Zealand and probably don't even realise that Bordeaux do kind of classical styles, but it is very different. It doesn't have that kind of punchy passion fruit gooseberry that you'd expect from...
No. Yeah, it's very much about that kind of fresh, crisp
More
style.
herbaceous, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Herbaceous and almost slightly savoury as well, which again I think makes it a great food pairing wine. Again, I'd probably head into maybe fish, seafood, possibly lighter white meats maybe. What would you guys say?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I think on the palate it has got that good acidity as well that can kind of make it really versatile as a match. And really nice finish as well. It kind of stays with you.
It really does. And actually there's something quite textural about this wine. I think it's had a bit of skin contact. Usually white wine is taken away from the skins immediately, but this one's been left on the skins, and I think that really adds to that savouriness that you mentioned and will make it really good with food.
Sure. Well, actually, so we've paired this with a salmon and watercress sauce in the brochure, which I think this is the wine that would cut through with that lovely fresh acidity. The other wine that we've paired with it, our next wine, is a Chardonnay, which I think would match really differently. This is where you're going to get that roundness standing up to the dish. So this is the La Roche Chardonnay. Could you tell us a little about this, please, Beth?
Yeah, so this is from Languedoc, so in southern France. So again, a nice warm climate, which helps kind of give the wine a bit of breadth when we get to tasting it. But we chose it because La Roche are a really well-known producer in Burgundy, specifically in Chablis, probably about as far from the climate of Languedoc as you can get. Much more cool climate up here.
But you get all their Chablis making expertise, don't you?
You really do. And it's a very classical style of Chardonnay. And from that warm climate, you get some really nice kind of stone fruit characters coming out, and you get a lot more breadth. It's not like that big oaky style of Chardonnay as well that some people kind of associate with Chardonnay.
So this is completely unoaked, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think the colour's beginning to develop compared with the others as well? It's still very pale, but perhaps
Yeah, and
edging towards straw, perhaps pale straw.
yes, there is a bit more colour there, which could suggest the kind of winemaking technique that's been used, and maybe just a bit more age in the bottle as well.
And what sort of flavours and aromas are we getting?
So very much getting kind of stone fruit notes, but you still do get some kind of apple character there. I think on the palate.
There's a creaminess coming through as well.
Sure.
I think it's definitely one of those ones for people who don't like the really, really dry, sharp Chablis styles, but also don't like a big, overwhelming, you know, fruit bomb. It's very kind of, you know, it'll please a lot of people, that wine. It's lovely.
Could be one of those, if you think you don't like Chardonnay, maybe this is a great place to start. Okay, excellent. Right. Again, heading towards slightly fuller wines. The order we're tasting these wines in, I'd say, is going from light and fresh through to fuller and richer. So our next one is a little bit fuller and richer. This is the Domaine Les Yeux Colombard Viognier.
So this is from Pays d'Oc. So again, that's the Languedoc region in southern France, but very different style and different grape varieties to the previous wine. So this is a blend of Colombard and Viognier. So Colombard is one of the most widely planted grape varieties in France, and it makes very kind of fresh and crisp wines. And it's been paired here with Viognier, which is completely the opposite in style, usually producing really rich kind of fat wines with lots of stone fruit notes. And so you get that, in this wine, you get that really nice richness from the Viognier, but with the Colombard just adds some really nice freshness on the palate.
It's a really interesting. I'm really looking forward to trying this actually, because I don't think it's a blend I've tried before.
So generally with Viognier, I kind of expect peach notes, which I think you really get on the nose here.
I mean, it feels like a very different nose to all the other wines we've tried, a lot more aromatic.
Yeah.
They're also a producer we've stocked for years at Majestic, and they're all, their Syrah is one of my favourites. So I think it's a really interesting one to have in the case, actually.
Again, lots of fruit, but good balancing, crisp acidity, keeps it fresh, keeps you wanting more.
Yeah. But you can really feel that weight on the palate from the Viognier. It's much richer in mouthfeel. And that's really coming from the fruit. I mean, again, it's not a really big oaky wine. You're getting lots of really rich fruit flavour and breadth there.
I think it feels like quite a versatile wine. And in terms of food pairing as well, where do you think you'd go with that?
I was just about to ask you. So, maybe kind of pork. I tend to go Viognier and pork because you get the kind of apricot-y notes with a... what would you think?
I think it is versatile. Absolutely, I think pork, white meats, but you could take it to vegetables as well and vegetarian dishes. I think we've gone for a courgette pasta, which would match really nicely with the sort of slightly lighter aromatic, maybe gently floral and herbal notes.
And coming into autumn now, maybe those kind of those kind of pumpkin dishes and that kind of thing. I think this would work really well with.
Yeah, really good one for vegetable dishes. Fabulous. Okay, and then on to our last white. So we've moved towards, I think, the biggest and richest style. This is a white Cotes Du Rhône. So Cotes Du Rhône Blanc from MAISON BOUACHONA.
So again, as with the Bordeaux, Cotes Du Rhône is a region you associate a lot more with red wines, and we have a white wine here. So completely different grape varieties, of which I've completely forgotten what they are.
They are Grenache Blanc, Claret and Viognier.
So Grenache Blanc, again, quite a kind of, can have quite a lot of width on the palate, but very, very nice and fresh. Claret helps to give really nice acidity. And what was the final one?
More Viognier.
More Viognier. So again, same fruits as with the last wine.
So I think it's quite an interesting one because with Cotes Du Rhône Blanc, it's not really a style that maybe a lot of people are familiar with yet, and you get a real breadth of weight with them. So if they're a bit kind of heavier on the oaking, which I think judging by the colour of this, it isn't necessarily. So it seems like a much lighter style, and I think you get that from a more southern Mediterranean Grenache Blanc based blend. So.
And there's a really nice floral note there from the Grenache as well, but without it becoming really soapy like some grape varieties can be. Just adding a really nice kind of floral edge to.
I'm going to touch of asparagus as well.
It's an interesting one, yeah. I can see what you mean though. Yeah, it's quite nice and
for good or ill.
Yeah, and I think white Cotes Du Rhône particularly shows great value. As Beth was saying, you typically find more red wine, so the white wine's not necessarily as well known. But in the Northern Rhône, white wines command enormously high prices, superb wines. But further down with the Cotes Du Rhône, you're often getting some of the same flavours, textures maybe, but just not quite at that the same price point. So a great value wine, I think, as well.
I think there's a lot going on there. I wouldn't really know where to start with a food pairing for that one. What have you guys gone for?
Again, we've paired it with a vegetable dish with a nice, maybe slightly creamy pasta. But absolutely, this would be great with roast pork. I'd say any white meats with fruits as well.
It's also shouting smoked salmon to me. It's got a smoky
lovely
edge to it. It really has.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to our red wines now, starting with the Beaujolais from Château de Piset.
So Beaujolais is just south of Burgundy in France. Some kind of count it as part of the region, but it's a different grape variety. So in Burgundy, you'd expect kind of Pinot Noir, whereas in Beaujolais, they grow Gamay. So Gamay, if we have a look at the wine, you'll notice it's quite pale in colour. So it's thinner skins, but also the winemaking technique here kind of reduces the juice skin contact, so you don't get so much colour from the skin as well. And the type of winemaking, when we move on now to smelling the wine, really brings out the kind of fruit notes you'd expect from the wine.
It's super fruity, isn't it? Just
it's
deliciously
youthful freshness.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can pretty much see through the wine, which is kind of always the benefit of going under a white kind of canvas, because you get a real idea of what to expect.
And yeah, it's like kind of really pure kind of cherry, strawberry, just like a big summer bowl of fruits there to smell. So CHATEAU, one of my favourite producers in Beaujolais, which is why we selected the wine, and we have the Morgon from the wine that we sell in store in Majestic, and they've been producing wines in the Beaujolais region for a long time, and so they really know the Gamay grape and how to get the best out of it. When we taste the wine, so the winemaking, again, it's not had much time on the skins, and so you don't get much tannin on the palate. So it's very much about the fresh, fruity kind of style.
Very juicy style.
And they are one of those producers that time and time again win countless awards and get picked up by the wine press. They're a real stalwart of the region.
Sure. I mean, this is a great summer red, isn't it? I mean, great any time of year, of course, but I think maybe one that could have a little chill.
Yeah, definitely.
And that would really bring, it's almost, I mean, if you look at the colour, it's almost like a really deep rosé, and just chilling it will really bring out that kind of fruit flavour. I love this style of wine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's delicious, isn't it? Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's a great summer picnic wine, but equally it can cope with slightly more savoury dishes. We've paired it with a chicken and chorizo bake. Those nice fruit crunchy flavours are going to pair really nicely with a little hint of spice, I think. Lovely. Okay, on to the next, which is the Maison BOUACHONA, the red Cotes Du Rhône.
Yeah, so the style of wine I guess most people will be a lot more familiar with. This is predominantly Grenache with some Carignan as well. And so the Grenache, similar to Gamay that we've just had, it's quite thin-skinned, and so it's not the deepest wine in the world. There is a bit more colour there. And again, similarly, you'd expect a lot of kind of red fruit on the nose. So have a quick smell. And
it smells autumnal, doesn't it? It's got that kind of bit of spice to it,
but it's kind of very baked strawberry, and so the Rhône just kind of south of Burgundy, so starting to get a bit warmer, so really getting that kind of richness. And Grenache is different to Gamay because on the palate you'd expect a lot more weight, and as Jack says, kind of a spicy character.
But how would you rate the tannins on these last couple of wines? Maybe a little bit more here than in the Beaujolais?
A little bit, but I mean, it's still not really kind of big tannic wine, so it makes it really nice and approachable, very easy drinking style.
It's got enough to give it structure, but it's not in any way unbalanced.
And Maison BOUACHONA, that this is from, has been making wines in the area for over a century, so lots and lots of local knowledge to how to bring the best out in the grape varieties here.
And again, I think quite a versatile wine actually for food pairing. I think because of that juicy, crunchy fruit, it could pair well with lighter dishes, with chicken, with vegetable dishes, but also because of that little bit more tannin, a bit of a hint of spice, then some richer red meats as well. Again, we've paired it with the chicken and chorizo bake, so I think it would pair really nicely with all those flavours.
And actually, I think it would go quite well with like a beef curry or something, because you don't have too much tannin. There is a spiciness that you kind of pair with the Indian dish.
Yeah, lovely idea. Lovely. Okay, heading to Bordeaux now for the Chateau TIMBERLAY Bordeaux Supérieur.
So the two key grape varieties in Bordeaux are Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. Depending where the grapes are grown for the wine, you can have more Merlot dominated grape wines or more Cabernet dominated wines, and this is on the Merlot end of the spectrum. So expect really nice kind of plummy fruit and a really nice supple palate, but there is some Cabernet there that will help give it a really nice freshness and a bit more structure as well.
So I think what you kind of have to remember with Bordeaux is they make as much wine as all of Australia. So you get that real variation across the regions. So, you know, one style of Bordeaux, if you like it or dislike it, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to like all of it. But I think this is it certainly smells very approachable and quite kind of, you know, crowd pleaser in that sense.
Yeah,
it's good plummy fruit there.
Definitely good plummy fruit, which is why we selected the wine, that you really get that kind of typicity of style of the plummy fruit, but also kind of savoury, kind of forest floor kind of character to it as well.
You sometimes hear the description of pencil shavings, and I'm getting that.
I always like that one.
Yeah.
Now we've gone for an interesting food match with this one, and I'd be interested to hear everybody's thoughts. But I know we were saying it's a great idea to pair wine with foods from the region where it's made. What grows together goes together, as Jack said earlier. But actually here we've gone for a completely different suggestion of grilled aubergine with tahini. And I think firstly it shows that, you know, quite savoury reds with lots of fruit, lots of good tannin, lots of structure. They don't have to go with meat every time. Particularly if you pick a more meaty vegetable and some sort of more smoky, richer flavours, then actually they can match really nicely with vegetable dishes as well.
I think that's a lovely pair. I think it's, you know, it's very easy to go back to the staples of just big red wine with red meat or whatever it is. And actually, you know, there's a whole world of kind of more interesting and vegetarian focused wine pairings out there. It's a really lovely one.
As we say, try it out for yourself and see what you think. So staying with Cabernet Sauvignon actually, but moving on to the Gerard Bertrand Cabernet Sauvignon.
So this wine is from the Languedoc, and so Bordeaux, where the previous wine was from, is kind of more coastal, so you get more that kind of Atlantic, slightly fresher style. Languedoc is a lot warmer, so we're expecting much richer fruit here. And obviously with the previous wine, the Merlot was dominating, whereas this is all Cabernet Sauvignon. So Cabernet Sauvignon tends to be quite cassis driven, often with that kind of pencil shaving and maybe just a tad of like a green herbaceous character as well.
This is the same vintage, but it has a more aged look to it as well, sort of more brick red, which is just an interesting distinction.
Well, the man behind this wine's a bit of a legend, isn't he?
He is. So Gerard Bertrand used to be a rugby player. Apparently I don't watch rugby, sorry.
He did, yeah.
Quite a famous one, I think.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely transformed the winemaking scene in the Languedoc. He's really helped to put it on the map and improve quality. And he has a very kind of environmental, sustainable kind of focus to growing grapes as well. A lot of his vineyards are organic. The rest are really sustainably produced. So a very, very good producer to be working with. Absolutely. So I think on the nose, versus the previous wine where you get really kind of fresh plum flavours, here it's really kind of rich, concentrated, almost slightly jammy kind of cassis notes, which just kind of shows that warmer character.
Sure, that nice Languedoc sunshine.
Yeah.
And if you look at the wine, it's very deep in colour. Cabernet Sauvignon thick-skinned, and as we move on to the palate, you would expect a bit more tannin here, but you'd expect them to be quite ripe because of the weather.
I mean, so it's another one we've paired with the grilled aubergine. I think here you could think about an occasion match, maybe think about being in the Languedoc on holiday, being out by the barbecue, having a bit of a grill, grilling some vegetables. So sort of pairing with that occasion and also the flavours in mind. I think the flavours would match again nicely.
Yeah. It feels like it's got Mediterranean herbs kind of built in, doesn't it? It's very...
Delicious. Okay. Now we, again, as with the whites, with the reds, we've moved from slightly lighter bodied and juicier through to those bigger, richer flavours. So we're getting on some big old wines now. We've got the Domaine Sainte Rose La Garrigue.
So this is kind of classic southern French blend. So similar to the Cotes Du Rhône we had, there is Grenache here, but also Syrah and Mourvèdre. So the Grenache giving kind of lots of body, really nice red fruit flavours. Syrah giving a bit more kind of texture, some tannin and kind of meaty character, and Mourvèdre giving a really nice freshness on the finish. This is also made by a really interesting couple, Ruth and Charles Simpson. So they actually own a vineyard in England, in Kent, and we sell a rosé for their English rosé. But they also, luckily for them, have a lovely property down in the south of France. I'd like a property down in the south of France as well.
I think they've very much done the classic move out there and live the dream. It's a beautiful looking place.
Yeah, well, luckily they make some pretty delicious wines as well.
And similar colour to the previous, the wine from Médoc, in terms of its sort of brick red characteristic compared with the more ruby red of the previous reds.
Yep, it's a 2018, so it's got 3 years aging on it. So yeah, the colour has evolved a bit.
And when we kind of talked about the Mediterranean herby side of the last wine, and this called La Garrigue, is there kind of significance behind that in that context as well?
Yeah, so Garrigue is kind of that kind of the aromas that you get in the south of France, kind of the herbs that come off the plains there.
It's a slightly leading question, wasn't it? Yeah.
Do you think you're getting some of that through in the aromas and the flavours?
Yes, I think definitely. Also, there's kind of a vanilla note, so I think this has probably seen a bit of oak compared to the Cotes Du Rhône as well, which gives it a really kind of, you've got really nice fruit and vanilla, and it just feels like a big hug in a glass kind of wine.
It's a good degree of complexity there. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's got a lot to say for itself.
There's a lot going on. It's definitely a bigger, spicier, bolder wine, isn't it? I think we would definitely pair this with then a bigger, bolder, spicier dish. We've suggested a sausage and lentil casserole, leaning towards the sort of cassoulets of the south of France. Those nice earthy dishes, and there's an earthiness that would pair well with the lentils. But any big, bold dish, I'd say.
I think as well, when you talked before about complexity and length, it really stays with you. That is a great quality wine.
Really still going, isn't it? Fabulous. Well, on to our last red then. I think.
Isn't it a shame to just tip these though?
So we finish off with the Fortin Terroir d'Altitude Malbec.
So again from the south of France, but Malbec, I guess nowadays is very much associated with Argentina. But I mean, its home traditionally was Bordeaux, where it was used as part of the Bordeaux blend, and also in the south of France in Cahors. So it's got a very, very long history from the south of France, and it was taken from there to Argentina. I think this version, we didn't go for Cahors because we felt this really showed the kind of varietal characters that people expect from Malbec now. So really kind of rich kind of blueberry fruit. And if we have a look at the wine, I always find Malbec really interesting because, I mean, it's just like this vibrant purple colour and deep because of the skins.
So it does tell you it's younger in development. So it's 2020 versus the 2018. So you can see the development hasn't happened yet, but it's still youthful, ruby, and such lovely fruit on the nose as well, just jumping out there.
It really is.
What are the kind of fruits you're getting there, Beth?
So very much kind of darker fruits, kind of blueberry, blackberry notes. I think maybe just a touch of spice there as well.
A bit of licorice maybe.
Oh yes, definitely some licorice, you're right.
And those really nice chunky tannins. Again, those will stand up really well to meats, red meats, grilled meats, but anything with a bit of earthy richness to it in terms of dishes.
That's why it's good to taste wines with friends, because you can fire out things and you go, oh yes, I hadn't noticed that, but it's definitely there. And that's how you build up your repertoire. You learn about wine because each time you pick it up, it's there, it's logged. And that's your frame of reference. And each time you're building on it. And then you're building on the fun because you can link it to a wine you had another time.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that is a very nice place to finish. That is our last wine. Actually, a really lingers, that one. It's a fantastically lengthy wine to finish on. You enjoy that for quite some time. That is our last wine today. If you've enjoyed these, we'd be delighted if you'd get involved. Let us know what you think. Leave a comment on our Facebook group. Also, if you've enjoyed them, look in your brochures. We've given you 2 more wines that you might enjoy as well. So call into your nearest Majestic, have a chat to the store team, and they will help you discover even more wines. But thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you with the next Wine Club by Majestic case.